Another Junior Day weekend and another Sunday conversation with Sean Fitz. If you saw the title of the video, you know what this is about, but Fitz, I always like giving you the open the present for Penn State fans. What do we got here with a commitment today?
We got a commitment from Alex Tatsch, one of the few prospects I've ever seen come out of Greater Latrobe High School, Latrobe, Pennsylvania, of course, southwest Pennsylvania. A guy that Penn State has been targeting for a few months now, and a guy that's really moved up the rankings, the staff's board. The rankings is still a little bit out on that one. We have him as an 89 3-star at on 3. His composite ranking puts him at 292 nationally as a 4-star prospect, but very early in these rankings, and I would expect him to be an on 300 player at some point. Very good player. You have to guess some of the things based on his competition, but from a projection standpoint, 6'2.5", 215, he can run. There's guys that can fit in the Big Ten like that.
Yeah, big linebacker. Guy we'll talk about a little bit of that down the road, but this is a guy you've had to pick in for a while. So if Penn State fans have felt optimistic about this, I imagine, and here it gets across the line. So can you tell us a little bit about Alex and his relationship with the Penn State staff, why you felt so confident early during the Penn State football season in 2023, putting in a pick a couple months ago at this point?
Well, Penn State's far ahead in Western Pennsylvania right now, compared to where they were even 5 years ago. There's a difference in the appeal of Penn State. And that goes to, I guess, sort of every corner of Pittsburgh. You signed a couple of kids from Central Catholic last year. Aliquippa has been a school that has suddenly opened to Penn State. Latrobe, they don't go to Latrobe very often, but that's a spot where Penn State should be able to pick up who they want. This was an interesting one to me because he was not really on the radar, didn't do the camp scene before his junior year, and then had a spectacular junior season. Again, you got to gauge where he's at coming from that competition level, but Penn State thinks he can play. A lot of other schools think he can play as well. An interesting recruitment in the sense that maybe we thought this one would wind up or would wrap up a couple of times. Visited for Junior Day earlier this month. That's kind of when we pegged him to commit. He did not do so. Owen Alicine was the guy that committed that weekend, but he came back this weekend and committed to Penn State in person, sort of reminiscent of Luke Reynolds last year, where he came for a visit and kind of felt that feeling. The feedback that we got after the first visit, we wanted to visit Notre Dame. Notre Dame actually just offered this week, but then popped up for an unannounced visit, told the staff in person that he was coming. And then this evening or this afternoon, whatever you want to call that, Sunday afternoon, officially joined the Nittany Lions commitment list. So that's kind of how those things work out with kids that you feel pretty strongly are going to end up at Penn State, but all of a sudden it happens all at once. So that's what happened with Alex Tatsch on this weekend.
Nothing is ever certain, and I want to couch this with the obvious of anything could change on a dime, but when a kid comes up for the second time in a month on a surprise visit for basically to commit, it feels like that one feels like a really good one. And this is a player, Fitz, that you had in a recent article about. Here's not just a guy that is a good football player and a guy that Penn State has a great relationship with. This is, as you mentioned earlier, this is a guy who they targeted. You had him in one of the top 10 players, I believe, that this staff would, high on their board. Is that right? That's
correct. Check out bluewhiteillustrated.com for that on Friday, but picked a top guy for each position, essentially. Kind of threw out running back there, but at linebacker is tough because you've got Cam Smith, you've got Anthony Sacca, you've got a bunch of guys that are all over the country that Penn State's very high on. But I went with Tash because the way that they have pursued him aggressively, even though he was one of those guys that you would have expected to end up in Penn State's class eventually. You kind of told the story of what they think of him. He's a box linebacker. We're going to talk about that in a second, I'm sure, but a guy that fits, could be a Mike, could be a Will. I think he was, I would label him as the top guy. I know they got DJ McClary on board already, but Tash gives you a little bit more size, gives you a guy that can run out there. You're going to find out what he's all about in terms of drops and coverage and things like that when he takes that giant step to the Big Ten. But he checks a lot of boxes and what you're looking for a box linebacker.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about his highlights and talk a little bit about what you think of him as a football player. I'll give some of my thoughts, of course, during my film room and analysis later. But here we are watching his highlights on the YouTube channel. What do you think about what he can do?
He should be the best player on the field. He is the best player on the field. He covers a lot of
Yeah.
ground that the guys that he's going up against cannot cover. So yeah, like I said, it's going to be a big jump to the Big Ten, but you've got the size to go with it. We don't really have any documented testing numbers, but his explosion, a lot of things that you see from him rushing the passer, as you see here, if you're watching on YouTube, those things seem to align with guys that they've taken in the past. It's tough to put a comp on him because I think he's a little bit more athletic than some of the mics that they've brought in, but maybe not as athletic as some of the outside guys that they've brought in. So it's tough to really go about and figure out who this guy, when you're tracking linebacker U, who this guy really compares to. So, but it's exciting. He's a two-way player. He's the best player on the field every week. He absolutely should be the best player on the field every week, and he backs that up with production and athleticism. So be interested to see where he makes the strides as a pass defender, as a guy who's going to have to play undoubtedly a more complex defense at the college level, but get blocks well, finishes, does a lot of things that you just look at. You going down that checklist of what you're looking for in a box linebacker. He does a lot of these things very well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Watching some of his, some of the full game film, you see it here on the highlights, but he is a finisher. He hits people and they go down. So you like that from a 6'3" guy. I think he's a really good Mike linebacker, as you mentioned. Some of the things that I find interesting is just his fluidity. His ability to drop into coverage and his ability to turn and run in certain directions. He's a guy that never looks like he's running very hard. This is a hard one for me, Fitz. When watching his film and getting into like the play-to-play stuff, he just never looks like he's going all out, and that always makes me concerned but curious. Like I don't know where that emotion lies, but it's like you see guys that when they go, like there's a snap, and with him, he's just always kind of chugging along and getting to the football. So it's just an interesting difference from some of the guys, as you mentioned, some of the other guys they've recruited, where you look at some of the outside Sam Will guys they brought in, Tony Rojas, there's a high threshold for being a freak and being an athlete at the position. He fits into what is a part of Penn State's linebacker U, clearly, and you love the frame. I'm curious, and I don't know if you know this, but just generally, Tom Allen and his, the defense, his reputation, all of that, I imagine, was a part of the having to get to know him and having to get to know the defense and getting that relationship off the ground. How would you gauge that particular part if you know anything about it?
Yeah, that's going to be the question here. Is Tom Allen going to bring that 4-2-5 look where you're playing with basically two box linebackers? And if he does, that's a great fit for Alex Tatsch. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think it changes much from Manny Diaz to Tom Allen. So I think that things go, if things continue to go in that direction, I think he'll be fine in figuring that out. Again, coverage is the big question that I have, and that's not so much based on like his tape. It's about like how much coverage does he have to do, and how much is it just like, hey, I'm the best player in the field. I can get to anywhere I want to get on this field and make this play. So that's kind of what I have with that. As far as like, doesn't look like he's running hard. There can be some good to that as well, because that means that you're probably a little bit more of a smooth athlete, and that tends to translate pretty well to the next level. Not saying he's soft or hard or anything like that, but like if you can do things, I liken it to a golf swing. Like if you can take your smooth golf swing and hit it 300 yards, you don't have to wind up to hit it 310. Like if you that is the big difference in like that level athlete versus guys that are, I don't want to call them tryhards, but like, hey, great for those guys. But if you're putting the max effort into it in every play, it's going to catch up to you eventually. So I see that in Tash, and hopefully that's something that's not just rotating in my mind as opposed to the reality of the situation.
Yeah, and we'll have to see. It'd be interesting if we get any testing numbers on him this summer. That is one that I'm very interested in. Linebacker in general, I'm interested in those numbers for players of that position.
Yeah, and I think we will, because Penn State does a great job of getting these guys to camp. And I mean, Tash has been up. He came up for 3 games this year. He came up in January. He came up twice in January, including this past weekend. So getting here is not an issue. So I'm going to guess that he's going to get here for one camp, two camp, multiple.
Yeah.
I mean, many camps. We will see what happens with that. You usually only need to test them once, but get them up here, work out with them, and that's what they've tried to do. We've talked about that so many times on the offensive line is working with Phil Troutwine, but get yourself used to the things that you're going to be doing at the college level. It's going to make you a better player at the high school level, and it's also going to get you ready for when you show up next year. Don't know if he's an early enrollee yet. I'll have to check with Ryan Snyder after that one. I know Ryan talked to him, I believe, this morning. So we will see what happens in terms of how ready he is for the Big Ten. It's going to be a big leap, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of things to like. And linebacker from Western Pennsylvania, Penn State fans are going to like him.
One quick, maybe like 60 seconds, 90 seconds here to end our conversation about Alex Tatsch. Let's zoom out a little bit. We're recording this, depending on when you see this, this is February 4th when we're recording this. This class, what do you think of 2025? 9 commits so far in the class of 2025. We're beyond good start, I feel like, at this point, as far as how the class is shaping together in February. So early work here. Is this a strong class? What are your opinions so far now that we've got some of the hay in the barn here?
Yeah, I think they're picking off a lot of the guys that make sense. I mean, you take a look around there. You got Brady O'Hara, Tyke Hayes. Now you add Alex Tatsch from Western Pennsylvania, Xavier Thomas. So that's 4 guys from the Pittsburgh area. Like that's a lot considering what Pittsburgh's talent production has been in the last couple of years. Like they're definitely good players coming out of there, but like so concentrated on the Penn State level, it maybe hasn't been there. So you see that you have to continue to build at certain positions. Talked about that piece that I wrote on Friday on top targets. I mean, you want to be in there with some guys, and some guys you're not going to end up with because the competition level, the NIL, the location, all these kind of things that come together is going to leave you looking at some positions. But I think it's a good start. A couple of running backs, got a quarterback in Beckham Kritz, has got a lot of arm talent. You're going to still continue to press for Matt Zollers, who was in town this weekend. And you figure out that, and then you got to go to receiver, which is, I mean, obviously the position that we've probably talked about most this offseason. We'll continue to talk about most this offseason at the high school level, at the college level, and whatever else level that we can figure out to talk about wide receiver. So that's going to be a big gauge, a way to gauge it there. And of course, along those offensive and defensive lines. So I think it's a good start. I think there's some really good players in here that can continue on the trajectory that they've, set out ahead of them. But a lot of work to do in this class of 2025 to find those impact guys that not only can play right away, but can take a defense to the next level, which is a lot harder to do now that this defense is at a very high level.
Yeah. Not going to get all 10 of those guys in your top 10 most likely, but you tick one off the list with Alex Tatsch. Check his article at bluewhiteillustrated.com. If you're here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, please subscribe here. And what's up?
Clarification, I did not know Penn State was getting him this weekend before I made him the top target. So keep your conspiracies to yourself.
It's the internet. I don't know. It's very good that you said that because you have to say those things. But internet conspiracies are going to just grow like weeds, unfortunately. We'll get out of here. We'll be back with more breaking news when there is more to talk about. Penn State has 9 commitments in the class of 2025. Some strong work. And as always, subscribe to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. If you're here on the YouTube channel, you can use our special offer, $2 for 1 month with code PSU1. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. He is Sean Fitz. We will talk to you next time.